It was a quiet evening, the kind where time seems to stretch endlessly, when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. At first, I ignored it, just another notification in the chaos of life, but something deep inside told me to check. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the eerie silence of the house that made the vibration feel louder than it should have been. When I finally picked up the phone, my heart stopped. It was an email from Mark, my husband, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-husband. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." My hands trembled as I tapped it open, and the words hit me like a freight train. "Lisa, I've left. I've met someone else. She's younger, and for the first time in years, I feel alive again." But that wasn't even the worst part. He casually mentioned leaving behind a $30,000 loan under my name, expecting me to clean up his mess while he started a new life with her. My knees buckled, and I clutched the counter to steady myself. How could this be real? 14 years of marriage, 14 years of shared dreams, struggles, sacrifices, all reduced to a cold, calculated betrayal in less than 50 words. My mind raced back to all the times we'd fought through hardships together, late nights worrying about bills, selling furniture to cover rent, even cheering each other on during his failed business ventures. And now, after everything, he had simply walked away without so much as a goodbye to our 12-year-old son, Noah. The weight of his abandonment crushed me. Not only was I left alone to face the wreckage of our crumbling finances, but I also had to figure out how to explain this to Noah. The man who once vowed to stand by my side forever was now sipping coffee on some beach with a woman half my age, laughing at the destruction he'd left behind. Every fiber of my being screamed in disbelief. How could someone who claimed to love me turn into such a stranger overnight? The thought of facing tomorrow felt unbearable. Yet there I stood, staring at the screen, trying to piece together what remained of my shattered world. That night, after the initial shock of Mark's email began to settle, or rather, after I thought I couldn't feel any worse, Noah hesitated at the doorway of my bedroom. His small frame was silhouetted against the dim hallway light, and for a moment he looked much older than 12. "Mom," he started, his voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart clenched. I had spent years protecting him from life's harsher realities, shielding him as best I could from the cracks in our family foundation. Now it seemed the walls were crumbling faster than either of us could brace for. He sat down on the edge of my bed, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "A few weeks ago," he began, pausing to swallow hard, "I saw something on Dad's phone." The words hung in the air like storm clouds, heavy and ominous. It was a message from someone named Celine. My breath hitched. That name again, the one from Mark's cryptic goodbye email. What did it say? I managed to ask, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Noah glanced away, guilt flickering across his face. It wasn't just one message. There were a lot of them. They talked about how much they missed each other, how happy she made him. He trailed off, then added quietly, almost reluctantly, there was even a heart emoji. My stomach churned. A heart emoji. Something so trivial, yet in this context, it felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. "I didn't read all of it," Noah rushed to clarify, mistaking my silence for anger. "Just enough to see her name and, well, the heart." His voice cracked and he looked up at me with wide, pleading eyes. "I didn't want to believe it, Mom. I thought maybe it was just a mistake, or that he was having a bad day, or..." His voice broke, and he buried his face in his hands. "I didn't want to hurt you." The weight of his confession hit me like a tidal wave. Here was my son, carrying this secret alone, shouldering the burden of knowledge no child should ever have to bear. I reached out and pulled him close, holding him tightly as if I could somehow shield him from the wreckage of our shattered lives. "This isn't your fault," I whispered into his hair, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. But deep down, I knew Noah was right. This wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It was a pattern, a betrayal far deeper than I'd allowed myself to imagine. As I held him, I couldn't help but wonder, how long had Mark been planning this? Was every promise he'd ever made to me and to Noah nothing more than a lie wrapped in pretty words? And what would happen when the truth finally came crashing down? The days that followed Mark's email were a blur of sleepless nights and suffocating anxiety. I watched as Lisa, my mom, tried to hold herself together, but the cracks were showing. She barely ate, her eyes hollowed with exhaustion, and every time she looked at me, I saw the weight of betrayal crushing her spirit. It was unbearable to see her like this, my strong, resilient mother reduced to someone who couldn't even muster the energy to argue when the loan company called again, reminding us that we were already behind on payments. That's when I decided I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I had to act. Late one night, after Mom fell into a restless sleep on the couch, I crept into her room and opened her laptop. My hands trembled as I logged into her email account, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would wake her. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, trying to figure out how to phrase the message. Finally, I typed, "Mark, the loan company is investigating. They're going to report you to the authorities if you don't contact us immediately. This isn't a warning, it's a threat." I hit send before I could second guess myself. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe he'd finally take responsibility. But hope has a way of crumbling quickly. A week later, as I sat in my room pretending to focus on homework, my phone buzzed. The caller ID read Dad. My stomach dropped. He never called, not since he left. I hesitated, then answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then his low, cold voice cut through like ice. "You must be Noah. You've got guts, kid, but you're playing a dangerous game. Don't mess with things you don't understand." His words stung, but they also ignited something inside me, a mix of anger and determination. How dare he talk to me like that? Like I was some reckless child meddling in adult affairs? I clenched my fists and forced myself to stay calm. "I understand more than you think," I shot back, surprising even myself with how steady my voice sounded. But he only laughed a cruel, dismissive laugh and said, "You'll regret this," before hanging up. I sat there, staring at the phone long after the call ended, my mind racing. What had I done? Had I made things worse? But deep down, I knew I couldn't have stayed silent. Not while Mom was drowning under the weight of his lies. The sleepless nights were starting to take their toll. My mind raced with unanswered questions and a growing sense of helplessness. How could Mark just vanish like that, leaving behind not only a mountain of debt, but also the shattered remains of our family? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smug face in my mind, laughing somewhere far away while Noah and I struggled to keep our heads above water. But then, one night, something shifted. Noah came to me, his face pale but determined. "Mom," he whispered, clutching his laptop like it was a lifeline. "I found him." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean, you found him?" He hesitated for a moment, then opened the screen. There it was, a GPS location tracker still linked to Mark's phone through our old family account. My heart skipped a beat as Noah zoomed in on the map. Harborview, a small coastal town I'd never heard of before. "He's there," Noah said, his voice trembling with anger. "With her." The name Celine burned in my mind like acid. That night, we didn't sleep. Instead, we made a plan. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. I couldn't let Mark think he could walk away from us without consequences. We packed lightly, bringing only what we needed: a change of clothes, my laptop, the loan documents, and a camera. Noah insisted on bringing a notepad to document every detail. "We need proof," he said firmly, his young face set with determination. "If we can show how he's using your money, we can make him pay." The drive to Harborview felt surreal, like stepping into a movie where the stakes were impossibly high. As we got closer, the air grew salty with the ocean breeze, and the picturesque charm of the town mocked us. Colorful shops lined the streets, couples strolled hand in hand along the beach, and laughter echoed from cozy cafes. It was the kind of place people went to escape reality, and now I knew exactly who was escaping here. When we arrived, Noah tracked Mark's location to a quaint bed and breakfast near the boardwalk. We parked across the street, watching silently from the car. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they turned white. And then there he was, Mark, tanned and smiling, wearing sunglasses as if he hadn't a care in the world. Beside him stood Celine, tall and beautiful, her laugh ringing out like a cruel reminder of everything we had lost. Noah's voice broke the silence. "That's her." His tone was cold, devoid of the warmth I usually associated with my son. I glanced at him and saw a hardness in his eyes that frightened me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore, it was about survival. "Let's go," I said quietly, grabbing the camera. "We're not leaving until we have what we need." The moment we arrived in Harborview, it felt like stepping into a dream world, one that was cruelly disconnected from the reality Noah and I were living. The town was picturesque, with its colorful shops, pristine beaches, and the salty tang of the ocean breeze. But none of that mattered to me. My heart raced as Noah tracked Mark's location to a small bed and breakfast near the boardwalk. We parked across the street, hiding behind tinted windows, watching silently. And then there he was, Mark, tanned and smiling, wearing sunglasses like he didn't have a care in the world. Beside him stood Celine, tall and striking, her laughter ringing out like a mocking echo of everything we had lost. They walked arm in arm toward a cafe, ordering expensive iced coffees and laughing as if life couldn't be better. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "That's her," Noah muttered beside me, his voice tight with anger. "She's the reason we're here." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to march over there and demand answers, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't just about confrontation, it was about justice. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, my heart pounding like a war drum. Noah followed close behind, clutching the folder of evidence we had painstakingly gathered. Mark noticed us almost immediately. His smile faltered, replaced by a look of shock mixed with irritation. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone sharp and dismissive. Before I could respond, Celine stepped forward, her eyes scanning me with cold disdain. "Oh, this must be the wife," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Mark told me all about you." My blood boiled, but I refused to let her provoke me. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots, transaction records, proving that Mark had used the loan money to fund this luxurious escape. "This isn't your vacation," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "It's paid for with my name, my credit, and my suffering." Mark's face paled as he stared at the evidence, but Celine only smirked. "Don't make such a big deal out of it," she sneered. "He hasn't been happy with you for years. You should thank me. I'm helping him live his best life." Her words cut deeper than any knife, but I refused to back down. "Helping him?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You're helping him destroy his family? Did he tell you about the $30,000 debt he left behind? Or how he abandoned his 12-year-old son without a second thought?" For a moment, Celine's confidence wavered, but she quickly masked it with arrogance. "That's not my problem," she snapped. "No," I said, stepping closer. "But it will be." 2 days passed in a haze of tension, each hour stretching longer than the last. Lisa and Noah had returned home after their confrontation with Mark, but the weight of what they'd uncovered lingered like a storm cloud over their heads. Every time Lisa checked her bank account or glanced at the loan notices on the kitchen counter, she felt the same knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She tried to focus on work, on cooking dinner, on anything that might distract her from the looming deadline. But nothing could silence the questions swirling in her mind. Would he actually pay? Or would he disappear again, leaving them to face the consequences? Then, on the third day, just as Lisa was preparing to gather all the evidence and head to the police station, her phone rang. The screen displayed an unknown number, and her heart sank as she answered. Hello? There was a pause, followed by a voice she recognized immediately, Mark's. His tone was frantic, almost unrecognizable. Lisa, please don't hang up. I'm in trouble. Her stomach churned as she listened to him ramble, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. People came to the B&B yesterday, he said, his voice trembling. They were asking about the camper I bought last year, the one tied to your credit. They showed photos, asked questions. I panicked and told them I didn't know anything, but I think they saw right through me. He paused, breathing heavily. Lessa, if this gets classified as fraud, I could go to jail. I could lose everything. For a moment, Lisa felt a flicker of pity, but it vanished just as quickly as it appeared. Let me get this straight, she said, her voice icy calm. You stole money, ran off with another woman, used my credit to fund your beach vacation, and now you're scared because people are starting to ask questions? Do you even hear yourself? There was silence on the other end before Mark finally spoke, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, okay. I know I messed up, but Celine left this morning, packed her stuff, and disappeared. She said I was a sinking ship and she wasn't going down with me. His voice cracked. She took the car and the last of the money. I'm stuck here, Lisa. I don't even have gas to get home. Lisa closed her eyes, forcing herself to stay composed. Part of her, the old, forgetting part, wanted to help, to fix things the way she always had. But then she glanced over at Noah, who sat quietly at the table, working on his homework. He looked calm, focused, determined. And she remembered why she couldn't be that woman anymore. If you want to make this right, she said firmly, cutting through his pleas, then take responsibility. Sign the payment agreement I sent. Pay back every cent you stole. Cooperate with the bank. Do the right thing for once. Her voice hardened. And if you don't, I'm going to the police with everything. Fraud won't be the only charge they press. Mark stammered something unintelligible, but Lisa didn't wait for a response. She ended the call, her hand steady despite the anger coursing through her veins. When she turned to Noah, he looked up and asked simply, "Was that Dad?" She nodded. "He's scared now," Noah said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Good. In the days following our confrontation with Mark in Harborview, I thought we had finally turned a corner. The signed payment agreement, though far from perfect, gave me a fragile sense of control, a lifeline to cling to after weeks of chaos. But just as I began to breathe easier, Noah walked into the kitchen one evening holding a piece of paper that would shatter whatever fragile piece we had managed to build. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this." I took the paper from him, my fingers brushing against his cold ones. At first glance, it looked like another mundane bill, but as my eyes scanned the details, my heart stopped. It wasn't just any bill, it was a notice for a second loan account opened in my name 5 months ago, with a balance of $22,000. My knees buckled, and I sank into the nearest chair, clutching the edge of the table to steady myself. How could this be happening again? After everything, after Harborview, after Celine leaving him, after his desperate pleas for forgiveness, he had done it again. He had used my identity once more, forged my signature, and stolen even more of my life. Noah knelt beside me, his young face etched with anger and fear. "I found it in mail," he explained, his voice shaking. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but then I checked the account number. "It's different from the first loan." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Different accounts, different loans, all under my name. I buried my face in my hands, trying to process the enormity of the betrayal. Mark hadn't just abandoned us. He had systematically dismantled what little stability we had left. The situation grew worse when Noah pulled up the transaction history on my laptop. The $22,000 had been used to purchase a camper van, a luxury item I never would have considered, and fund a series of extravagant personal expenses, hotel stays, restaurant bills, and electronics. Each line item felt like another slap in the face, another reminder of how recklessly Mark had treated my trust. "He didn't stop," Noah muttered, his voice filled with venom. "Even after everything, he didn't stop." For a moment, I felt like the walls were closing in. The weight of 2 loans, the mounting legal fees, and the constant fear of what Mark might do next threatened to crush me. But then I looked at Noah, his jaw clenched with determination, and something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about justice. Mark had underestimated us once, and I wouldn't let him do it again. "We're not letting him get away with this," I said firmly, standing up. "Not this time." The morning I walked into the police station, my hands trembled as I clutched the folder filled with evidence. It wasn't just paper, it was proof of betrayal, greed, and deceit. Every receipt, every screenshot, every GPS record told a story not only of Mark's crimes, but also of our fight to reclaim what was rightfully ours. Noah had insisted on coming with me, his small hand gripping mine tightly. "We're doing this together," he had said the night before, his voice unwavering despite the storm brewing inside both of us. So there we were, mother and son, standing in front of a detective who looked over the documents with furrowed brows. "This is quite comprehensive," the detective finally said, breaking the silence that had stretched thin between us. He flipped through the page's emails where Mark admitted using Lisa's name, transaction record showing extravagant purchases made with her credit, even screenshots of Celine's mocking messages. His expression shifted from curiosity to something darker. "It looks like a textbook case of identity theft and financial fraud." Those words hit me like a thunderclap. For months, I had doubted myself, wondered if I was overreacting, if I could have prevented all of this somehow. But now, hearing someone else confirm it, I felt a strange mix of relief and fury. Relief that justice might finally be within reach, and fury that it had taken so much to get here. 3 weeks later, the call came. Mark had been arrested at an Avzying to withdraw cash from an account linked to the second fraudulent loan. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He couldn't deny forging signatures, maxing out credit cards, or abandoning his family while living large on stolen funds. When the trial began, I stood in court, staring at the man who once promised to love and protect me. He looked smaller now, diminished, not physically, but spiritually. All the arrogance, all the smugness that had fueled his recklessness seemed to evaporate under the weight of accountability. The judge didn't mince words. "You abused your position as a spouse, manipulated identities, and left your child without support during difficult times," she declared sternly. Her ruling was clear: full restitution for both loans, garnished wages to cover monthly payments, and mandatory child support for Noah. Additionally, Mark was sentenced to 60 days in county jail and 18 months of probation, a punishment harsh, enough to teach him a lesson, but lenient enough to remind him that consequences linger long after freedom returns. As we left the courtroom, Noah turned to me, his eyes shining with quiet pride. "We did it, Mom," he whispered. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed we truly had. The day after Mark's arrest, I thought the nightmare was finally over. The police had taken him into custody, and the evidence against him was overwhelming: forged signatures, maxed out credit cards, stolen identities. It felt like justice was within reach for the first time in months. But Mark wasn't done fighting, not yet. 2 days later, as Noah and I sat at the kitchen table reviewing documents with our lawyer, my phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with an unknown number. My stomach tightened as I hesitated, then answered. "Lisa," came a voice I recognized instantly. It was Mark, his tone low and menacing. "You don't know what you're starting here. If you push this any further, there will be consequences." His words sent chills down my spine, but I refused to let him see my fear. "Consequences?" I shot back, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "What could possibly be worse than what you've already done? You abandoned your family, stole my identity, and left us drowning in debt. What else do you have?" There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the smirk in his voice when he replied, "Don't say I didn't warn you." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hands trembling slightly. He was trying to intimidate us, to make us doubt ourselves again. But this time, it wouldn't work. Not anymore. Noah looked up from his papers, his young face etched with concern. "Mom, who was that?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure how much to tell him. But then I remembered something crucial. We were in this together. "It was your father," I admitted. "He's trying to scare us into backing off." Noah's jaw tightened, and I saw a flicker of anger in his eyes. "We can't let him win," he said firmly. "Not after everything." And he was right. For weeks, Mark continued to harass us through emails and calls, each message filled with veiled threats and manipulative guilt-tripping. "Think about Noah," one email read. "Do you really want him growing up seeing his father in jail?" But we didn't budge. Every threat only strengthened our resolve. We gathered more evidence, consulted with lawyers, and prepared ourselves for whatever came next. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Noah leaned his head against my shoulder. "Do you think he'll ever stop?" he asked quietly. I sighed, running my fingers through his hair. "Probably not," I admitted. "But we're stronger than him. Together, we can handle anything." Months after the storm of Mark's betrayal had finally settled, life began to take on a new rhythm, one that was quieter but infinitely more meaningful. Lisa stood in the small kitchen of their new apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows and casting golden patterns across the countertops. It wasn't much a one-bedroom unit with creaky floors and mismatched furniture, but it was theirs. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of ownership over her life. The financial wounds were still healing. The debt had left scars, but they were fading slowly, like ink washed away by time. Every evening, Noah joined her in the kitchen, chopping vegetables or stirring pots while they talked about their day. These moments became sacred, a ritual of rebuilding not just their lives, but also their bond. Gone were the silences filled with unspoken pain. Instead, laughter echoed off the walls as they teased each other about burnt toast or overly salty soup. "You're getting better at this," Lisa joked one night, watching him carefully flip an omelet. Noah grinned, his confidence shining brighter than ever before. "Maybe I'll be a chef someday. Or maybe I'll write stories about brave people who fight back." And he did. In the months following their confrontation with Mark, Noah had started a blog titled Courage and Justice. At first, it was just for himself, a way to process everything he'd been through, but soon others began reading. He wrote about standing up to bullies, about how even when the odds seem stacked against you, there's power in speaking your truth. His posts resonated deeply with readers, especially those who had faced similar betrayals. Comments poured in from strangers thanking him for sharing his story. One message read, "Your courage inspires me to stand up for myself too." Lisa watched her son transform with pride swelling in her chest. The quiet, observant boy who once hid secrets out of fear had grown into a young man full of determination and purpose. She often found herself marveling at his resilience. "Do you think Dad will ever understand what he lost?" Noah asked one evening as they sat together on the couch, flipping through old photo albums. Lisa hesitated, then shook her head. "Probably not. But that's his loss, not ours." The apartment may have been smaller, but it overflowed with light, not just from the sun, but from the hope they had fought so hard to reclaim. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving. And though the past would always linger in the corners of their minds, it no longer defined them. Together, they had turned a story of betrayal into one of triumph, and nothing could ever take that away. This wasn't just a story about betrayal, it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Lisa and Noah had been shattered, left in the wreckage of Mark's selfishness and greed. He had taken everything, trust, security, even their sense of self-worth, and yet they chose not to stay buried under the rubble. They fought back, not with violence or vengeance, but with courage and determination. Every email sent, every piece of evidence gathered, every late-night conversation between mother and son became a brick in rebuilding their lives. Together, they faced the storm head-on, refusing to let despair define them. The journey wasn't easy. There were moments when Lisa doubted herself, when the weight of $52,000 in fraudulent loans felt insurmountable. There were nights when Noah lay awake, questioning if they would ever truly escape the shadow of his father's actions. But through it all, they leaned on each other, finding strength and unity. It wasn't just about reclaiming money or justice, it was about reclaiming themselves. Lisa learned that she was stronger than she ever imagined, capable of standing up to someone who once made her feel powerless. Noah discovered a voice within him, one that refused to be silenced by fear or intimidation. And so, as they sat together in their new apartment, surrounded by sunlight and laughter, they realized something profound. The very tragedy that nearly destroyed them had become their greatest teacher. It taught them how to fight, how to heal, how to rise from ashes stronger than before. They didn't just survive, they thrived. Because sometimes the darkest storms lead us to rediscover who we truly are.